Because if you can design a product or service for an underserved market, you're going to hit a home run every time. I always looked at markets with an eye saying, okay, who's my competitor? What market share do they have? What markets do they serve? But more importantly, I'm really doing my homework to find out what markets are underserved. Because if you can design a product or service for an underserved market, you're going to hit a home run every time.
Hey, sales hunters, welcome to season 2 of Beyond the Business Plan, where heart meets hustle and every episode inspires you on your entrepreneurial journey. I'm LeAnn Lyon, and together we'll chart new courses, tackle challenges, and celebrate those big wins with expert guests, honest stories, and plenty of joy along the way. If you love the show, tap follow, subscribe, leave a quick review, or join our conversation with hashtag JoyMinder, because your support helps us reach and inspire more entrepreneurs. Set sail on your business adventure with Beyond the Business Plan. My guest today is the founder of PCP Digital and host of Galveston Bay BizCast. With a rich 35-year background in newspaper and media management, Steve brings a wealth of experience into publishing, finance, marketing, and more to his role as a fractional CMO for small and medium businesses. A Florida Atlantic University grad with advanced certifications from Northwestern and the American Press Institute, Steve Paterson is celebrated for his innovation in business development and is the recipient of the James M. Cox Award of Excellence. And this is based on his achievements in publishing. Alongside his wife, Deborah, and 2 daughters, Steve's personal life is as fulfilling as his professional journey. Steve, my friend, are you there?
Let me see. Yep, here I come. Here I am. Here I am.
Here
Good
he
morning.
is. Oh, Steve, it's such a blessing to have you here. We've met years ago through the marketing platform that we both use. And we've had so many conversations. So reading that introduction, I'm like, yep, I know. Yep, I know. Nothing new here for me, but that award was pretty special. And you told me about it really when we first met. Do you want to
Right.
tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah. So every year, Cox Media, in their search for excellence to build excellence, offered a program called the James M. Cox Award, and literally it was a bunch of things that you had to do without fault over a period of the year, a calendar year, to qualify. Not even to win, just to qualify. And then you were up against people in my case, I was in the newspaper division, but there was also broadcast division. They owned the Auto Trader, they owned Valpak, they owned a lot of different companies. So you're up against a lot of other people. And that year I strived, even if I didn't win the award, I looked at the premises building me as a better person. If I could even achieve this level of excellence to get a qualification, that would make me better in my business. And so that was my whole idea about when I did it. And lo and behold, I won it.
Yay.
And so I said, okay, that's pretty cool. And then so I applied myself the next year and I won it 2 years back to back.
Oh, I did not know that.
And so what you get for it is you.
Hey, sales setters, want to navigate your success with ease? Download the Sailing System, your practical guide to charting a course, setting goals, and growing with purpose. Find it now at joyminder.com or check the show notes below for your roadmap to results.
And so what you get for it is you get this big gigantic ring that's made by the same company Balfour that makes the Super Bowl rings. And it's personalized to you, has your name on it and the property you're at, and it says excellence on it. And above around the top of it, it says James M. Cox Award. And in my case, what they did was they put 2 diamonds in it for the 2-time recipient award. So for me in the newspaper publishing business, it was like having a Super Bowl ring because anybody who was in the business knew what it was. Other newspaper companies like Gannett had several programs. There was one called the Gannett's President's Program, which you'd see the Gannett guys that have Gannett rings on and you do that. So it's basically like wearing your resume on your hand.
Right. Well, you worked in publishing for a long time. Was that something you went right into right out of college?
Actually, I did by accident.
Okay, let's
I
hear
was
it.
not. I was not. I was on my. I just finished my graduate studies at Florida Atlantic University, and I applied to go to law school, and got accepted. And but the problem was there was 9 months between my start date in law school and when I graduated. And being a little bit older, I didn't want to move back in with my parents. And and I had a roommate at the time, and he needed somebody else that could help pay the rent. So I figured if I was going to stay in Boca Raton, Florida, where Florida Atlantic is, I was going to help pay the rent. So I had to go get a job. So I went, which you did back in those days. You went to the local newspaper and you went to the classified ad section, and I found this ad for a position that doesn't even exist anymore, called a paste up and layout artist, and they're called graphic designers now
Sure.
because everything's done on computer. But back when I started in the business, everything was still paste up and layout. And
Wow.
so I actually went to work in that position, got hired, and through circumstance or providence, I don't know which one it was. The publisher took note of me and wanted to meet with me. We had a coffee and donut type thing, and he asked if I would be interested in moving because he had just terminated an individual for theft from the company, and they moved me over into advertising. And it was supposed to be a temporary gig. Uh, Found out I liked it. I was very good at it. So about a month or so into that job, they put me into it permanently. It was supposed to be a temporary position. And then that year, when it was time to go to law school, which I had disclosed to them, they talked me into staying another year, and I did. And in the following year, they offered me a major accounts position at the newspaper,
Uh-huh.
and I stayed there. So I never went to law school, and so 35 years, 45, 40 years later, I found myself running the largest community newspaper company in the United States.
Amazing. And any regrets not going to law school?
Nope, not at all. I,
None.
I was making more as an ad rep in my first year than I would have as a first year attorney.
Oh, wow. Well, I have heard, and this might be a little outdated, but as of a year or two ago, not long ago, the average attorney in the United States makes less than $100,000 per year. In fact, I remember the number being 80,000. Maybe it's up to 85, but you know, there's teachers that make that much, and
Right.
teachers complain about their pay, and
With
they
not
don't have a $250,000
yet.
of debt that they're starting out with as well. Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So so I got into business and I found out I was quite good at it. And others in the business also saw that I was very curious about different parts of the business. And so in my third year, the company who owned the Boca Raton News at the time was Knight Ridder. At the time, was one of the largest newspaper companies in the United States, and their headquarters was in Miami, Florida, at the Miami Herald. And so, in my third year in the business, the publisher I worked for nominated me for their publishers program, succession program. And so I was at a very young age put on the pathway to becoming a newspaper publisher.
So at what point did you feel like you kind of, I mean, you were a W-2 employee for this whole time, but at some point you're in more of a leadership or responsible role. Does that kind of shift your mindset towards being entrepreneurial as well?
Well, I was always entrepreneurial. I mean,
Oh,
this is something that's always been in me. Even when I was, when I was one of the things that my first ad director noticed in me was that I was very analytical in my approach to sales, because of my finance education in the master's program I was in, and I just like numbers. And back in the day, you used to get your reports, and they'd be on these old daisy wheel printers with green lines on them, and it would have all your accounts and how many inches of advertising they wrote that month, what their average rate was. It was all this data, right? So I
yeah.
said, "This thing," and I sat down one day a couple weeks in and figured out if I just sold if I only made every ad I had one size bigger, that I could increase my commission check by 10%.
Uh-huh.
And I figured out. So I went out and I did that. And then I also found it awfully funny. It was just funny to me that most of my advertisers at a daily newspaper only advertised 1 day a week.
Uh,
And I said, well, why aren't you advertising multiple times a week? Because, not everybody, especially single copy when you buy from the newsstand. I
sure.
said, you don't always have the same readers every day. So you have expanded audience. So, you're missing audiences in doing that. So I started convincing a lot of my advertisers to run, 2, 3 days a week. So, so my revenues just grew. And the other thing is I also it was weird. I kind of just internally looked at my job as I basically work for my customer.
Yeah.
I don't work for the company. The company is a tool that I use that I'm an intermediary with that helps my customer prosper.
That is not a mindset that a lot of W-2 people have. They often look at it. Yes, I love that, and it's brilliant. And I think I had a similar revelation when I worked for Yellow Book. Yellow Book, Yellow Pages,
Yep.
another thing that no longer, I mean, it
Yeah.
does technically exist, but it's not longer as prevalent as it was 20 years ago and 50 and
Yep.
100 years ago. But I also did ad sales. And it was the same idea. I would be given a book of business, and it was up to me to say, hey, you have this size ad, but look at what your competitor is doing, if you want to jump up to that. And I was just very, very good at it. But that's when I fell in love with business and business people right there, learning their stories, hearing their hearts. That's what really led me to doing what I'm doing today.
The other thing is that very early in my career, my dad was not very happy that I was in the newspaper business. He just based on his background and everything else, he kind of looked at sales
uh,
as something that people did when they failed at everything else.
oh, no.
They
No, no.
didn't, but he didn't understand it was a craft and a skill and and all these different things that you learn when you're good at sales. I mean, there's a lot of people who are in sales their whole life. They just
Sure.
go, yeah, they just show up. They don't do anything. 12 of a sudden 30, 40 years goes later and they retire. And what'd you do for me? Oh, I just showed up every day, but you
Ugh,
didn't really do anything, right?
yeah.
And with me, I was looking, but the advice I got was whatever you're going to be doing, this is, I said, yeah, find out what other people don't like to do in that profession and become the best at it.
Yep.
And in newspapers, as you know, in Yellow Pages, one of the things that reps hated, because usually there was nothing to take care of it for, was co-op advertising.
What's that?
So cooperative advertising is when manufacturers help you pay for your ads
Oh,
or distributors. So there's always a lot of paperwork involved.
sure.
And so, they didn't want to do the paperwork and everything else because they just thought it was a drag. So I was sitting there one day and I went to my boss and I said, look, we're leaving all this money on the table. There's a whole nother revenue stream with distributors and manufacturers reps that we're not tapping into. But the problem is there's all this paperwork. What if we were to put a department together? This is probably my first entrepreneurial job in the newspaper. Says, why don't we put together a department with a couple of clerks that all they do is they process all this paperwork for the sales reps so we can increase our revenues. And he said, how much money is there? I said, well, I don't know. I said, just what I'm doing a month that, that I'm doing the paperwork on, there's a couple $1,000s a month. And he goes, well, really? And so we put it together as an experiment.
Yeah.
And then 6 months later, the department was processing a little over $100,000 a month in new revenue.
Wow. And this was not just last year. So
No,
100,000
this
a
is this is
month was
this is this was
significant.
this was 1984.
Wow. Yeah, 100,000 a month
Yeah,
over $1 million a
a
year
year. Yep, in new
would have
revenue.
been significant
And
back
then
in.
we actually took that a step further 2 years later, where we had a phantom desk in the office with coffee and donuts every morning, with a computer and a typewriter. Still had typewriters at that time, and a fax machine and a telephone. So manufacturers reps are like traveling salesmen. They may have like their territory may be the state of Florida. So they're making their rounds all the way around to their dealers all around the state on a regular basis. Well, when
Uh-huh.
they came to Palm Beach, we would say, okay, you can, here's an office for you to use while you're here.
Oh,
And then the newspaper also had a theater inside the newspaper for like doing seminars and sales
oh.
meetings and stuff like that. So we would offer that to them to bring their dealers in to do new product presentations. And then when we would come in there, then we would put together an ad promotion for those new products. And then the dealers would sign over their co-op funds to the newspaper to promote it.
So lots of innovation. That's what I'm hearing is,
Yeah.
some of your entrepreneurial spirit is partially just that you're always looking for innovation. You're looking for new revenue sources, really important in business.
Yep,
Uh,
absolutely.
okay. So what other key aspects of your W-2 really translate more directly towards entrepreneurship?
So I mean, so that was, the beginning. And because of that, I got national recognition
Mm-hmm.
in trade magazines at the time, which were Press Time and Editor and Publisher. Editor and Publisher still exists. And it actually got me recruited to a corporate newspaper job very early. And
Okay.
I became the corporate developer of new business development for 160 different newspapers.
160. Oh, that's a few.
So I would, my job was to replicate some of the stuff I'd done in innovation at the other newspaper company to do that. And so I went out and did that, and then eventually got promoted to a senior vice president level on the corporate side, having advertising for national retail, classified, uh, doing all the training, overseeing training for
Mm-hmm.
newspaper companies and negotiating deals with representative firms who represented our company and doing those things. And did that for about 5 years. But again, I'd always wanted to be a publisher. And so uh, I was having publishers now working for me, never been one.
Yeah.
And I was very young. I was probably 20 or more years junior than most of my compatriots. And I would always see that look in their eyes when I was on their newspaper properties about what does this kid know? He's never been an operator. And, so I made a decision. One of the reasons was I had two little daughters that were growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And that last year on the corporate side of the business, I was on the road 300 days.
Oh, oh,
So I was
oh,
missing a lot.
yeah.
And so I decided that it was time to park my butt back at home again. And so an opportunity came to become a publisher, and it was offered to me by somebody I'd worked with Cox at Cox Media, and they were looking for a group publisher in the middle of the Mojave Desert in Arizona.
Okay.
So I actually went out and I took a job and had a division of Brem Communications known as News West, and I managed the newspaper group that covered Bullhead City, Laughlin, Kingman, Arizona, Lake Havasu, right there in the three corners there in Needles, California, and oversaw the operations and a printing plant that printed publications for other people. So it was commercial printing as well.
Did you
So,
move your family over there?
yep, we moved from Pennsylvania to Arizona,
Oh dear.
and right in the middle of the desert where it does get hot. I mean, first summer we were there, there was days when it was 128 degrees, and but I grew to love the desert. I liked it out there. It was nice,
Mm,
but it was a property that was large enough for me to really hone my skills, but small enough where mistakes didn't really hurt me. Because if you're going to learn, you have to make mistakes. And I
right.
had a boss who was very forgiving,
Okay.
and
Very
and
good.
he liked what he did. And what he really liked was that was my first fix-it job. And the reason I was put out there is that group of newspapers was actually losing money, which that never happened. And so 3 years later, I had taken that newspaper to the number one position in his company, that group,
Oh wow.
and
Good.
profitability. And he's actually the one who encouraged me. I've always had encouragement along the way. My bosses have been really good
Yeah.
about encouraging growth or allowing me to do some of these harebrained schemes innovation I get because they know that I think it through. They know I'm very analytical when I look at, as you know, when I do things, LeAnn, with our meetings, I always put numbers to everything.
Yeah.
I
Yep.
mean, even the podcast I'm doing now currently,
Right.
I had figured out what it had to be to be profitable, how many sponsors I need to get, do all that kind of stuff, and and before I even launched it.
Yeah.
So,
And when we get back, that real transition, like at some point you left the W-2 world. And so we'll dive into that a little bit more with my guest, Steve Paterson. My name is LeAnn Lyon. This is the Beyond the Business Plan podcast. Hey, sales setters, do you need energy without the crash? Check out the lifestyle section in our resources on joyminder.com/resources for delicious, healthier coffee alternatives to boost your focus and fuel your hustle. Skip the jitters, love your brew. You can also go directly to whyilovemycoffee.com, and I'll see you there. And we're back. We are here today with Steve Paterson, award-winning publisher, become entrepreneur. And we've been talking about how, as a W-2 employee, you still were very entrepreneurial. You were very forward-thinking. You were solving problems. You were treating customers as your boss instead of your boss as your boss, and a lot of other really quite entrepreneurial type things. But at some point, you actually left the publishing world
I did.
and became an entrepreneur. When was that you left the publishing world? Because right now, you just before
Yeah.
break, you said you were with a group and they had become unprofitable. I think a lot of newspapers have struggled through that now in the past few years, especially since the pandemic. So was that before then or
Well, actually, I mean, one of the things, as you said in my credits, is that I worked for a company that owned the Orange County Register, Freedom Communications. I ran a group of newspapers for them in South Texas
hmm
for quite a period of time. One of my bonuses a year was they actually sent me to the Medill School at Northwestern University to get certification in media management
Okay.
and expand duties. That was about $100,000 investment into me to do that as a reward for the work I'd done for them. Uh, about that time is when I kind of separated from being a W-2 employee
Okay.
and became contractual.
Oh,
So
okay.
you would hire me for a certain period of time, pay me a certain amount of money. I was still technically an employee, but a
Sure.
contracted employee.
Sure.
And so I got all the benefits and stuff like that. And but when you go into those type of things, you can negotiate your own pay terms. So
Yes.
part of my packages would be like company stock, shares, profit sharing plans, other things that deferred income, all those type of things. So so I moved the rest of my career, but I finished my career in California, in the San Francisco Bay Area, where I oversaw the community newspaper division of the Bay Area News Group. So I
hmm
oversaw 23 different publishing entities in the San Francisco Bay, Northern California area. And I managed those properties, whether they were digital or legacy media, and doing stuff. All during that period of time, I mean, some of the other things I did, you have to, I kind of looked at news. This is another way I looked at my companies. I looked at my companies if I can present an idea or an innovative idea as my banker, because they would have to fund it. So
Okay.
we would fund them internally. So I approached building business plans, my performas, and all those things internally, as when I would go to the board of directors, it would be like going to a lending group at a bank. And I would approach it that way so they could basically look at the idea and see it, for what it was.
Yeah.
So, and that enabled me to do a couple things. One, in 2008, I launched the first podcast in a newspaper in the United States.
Well, there you go. 2008.
2008. Then the
Whoa.
other thing is a year later, I launched the first hybrid daily newspaper in the United States, where it was digital 7 days a week, printed 3 days a week, and it was a 7 day daily. And that had to be recognized by the Auto Bureau of Circulations in newspaper business because it was a hybrid. Nobody had ever seen anything like that. So they didn't know how to classify us. Were we a weekly? Were we a daily? Were we a what were we? And
Yeah.
they finally classified us as a daily newspaper. We
Okay.
just were a different model. So I also launched the first hybrid daily in the United States
Oh, very cool.
in doing
Wow.
that. So I mean,
Podcast, now, were you on that podcast? Were you
and,
part
and, and how I got the idea for it was
of 2007?
I was sitting one evening, we had an editorial board meeting, And that's where you have members of the community come in and they give you their opinions about what you're doing as a company, but also what are the important things that you need to cover in the community that are important to the readers and stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that. And then, so they're like an advisory board for you.
Sure.
That's what editorial boards do for you. Well, I mean, I had a really great editorial board in Oklahoma when I was publishing in Oklahoma City, and these guys were like really fun to watch. It was like Sunday morning roundtables on the political shows.
Oh, fun.
And and I was thinking about this and I was going, God. And I just started reading about podcasts. And I said, geez, I wish I could capture this. This is great discussion that the public would love to hear.
Yeah.
So I approached my board, my editorial board, and said, I want to do this. Well, at the same time, I was having lunch with the president of Oklahoma Christian University in Edmond, Oklahoma, and he was telling me about they were putting in a new podcast studio at the university
Mm-hmm.
to start teaching podcasting at the university as a course. And I said, could I use that? So we formed a partnership with the Oklahoma Christian University,
Oh,
and we launched a paid podcast called Studio 46. And the reason we called it Studio 46 is because Oklahoma was the 46th state.
oh, fun. Okay.
And so we started doing it. And what we did was we let people know about the podcast by, we had about 25,000 subscribers to the Edmond Sun. And so we let them know that that was going to be on there. And we also had their email addresses. So we pushed out an email blast to them with a link to go to the podcast on our website to drive traffic. And then Oklahoma Christian University did the same thing with their alumni
Oh,
and students.
sure.
And so we had an instant audience,
Yeah.
and that audience grew over a 2 year period to well over 100,000 a week.
Nice.
And we had great guests. I mean, because of the connections we had as a newspaper and my editorial staff, and we were able to get some names. So our first two guests were Mike Huckabee, who was at the time governor of Arkansas,
Mm-hmm.
and then we also had a gal who was the governor of Oklahoma the next week,
Wow.
and then we had several people on there. We also had a young man who was running for Congress at that time that nobody really knew about. Came out of nowhere, but we had a lot of good things to say. And you see him on TV all the time now. His name is James Langford, who's
Okay.
the senior senator from Oklahoma. And so, we had a lot of very interesting people and a lot of discussions about that. But we also talked about local stuff as well as, so it was a segment, it was an hour long,
Mm-hmm.
about 20-minute segment with our main guest. But then the other stuff was all local issues like economic development, business, law, litigation, stuff that was in the House and in the Oklahoma, legislature and stuff like. So it was very interesting information. But it got to the point where just before I left to move to California, the local Fox network was looking at picking it up as a morning show.
Oh, okay. Wow.
So when I left California I left California. They wanted to renew my contract after 5 years, but I wasn't interested in it because I didn't like specifically where publishing was going.
Yeah.
Uh,
And when was that? What years were
it was
this?
2014,
Okay, that's what I figured. Okay.
2014, and so like 11 years ago. So I basically walked away from the business with I didn't know what I was going to do. But fortunately, knock on wood, I didn't have to worry about where my next dollar was coming from. And so I literally could have retired. Just
Sure.
said, okay, I'm done and do that. But I'm not that type of person, as you
Yeah, I
know.
was gonna say, some of us are never
No,
meant to
no,
really retire.
no.
Now, I know you have a big vision for what you are doing and
Mhm.
what you will do, but I get it. Even 11 years ago, you're like, yeah, I'm not gonna just jump into fishing right now.
No, no. And so I actually went down to join my local Chamber of Commerce here where I live. And found myself several months later being the president and CEO of that chamber.
There you go.
And did some really innovative things in the chamber world and the nonprofit world over that little deal. And then I got, it was time for me to move on to something else. Well, actually, I was going to, oh, maybe I should retire. That lasted about 6 months. And then I got involved in because I worked with very closely with the University of Houston Small Business Development Centers
Hmm.
and saw the frustrations that small businesses were experiencing, especially in two areas. One was finance, and the other capital management. The other one was marketing,
Yep.
which I know. And so I said, why don't I go ahead and form a consultancy firm? And did so. And got a couple clients, and that grew, and that came with now is PCP Digital, which is Paterson Consulting Partners, and grew, and where what really helped it take off was the common platform that
Mm-hmm.
you and I use, that I figured out a business model on.
Yep. And actually,
And
we met in Texas at an
yep,
event. I actually looked at that in my notes in my phone. It's right in there. I
yep,
named the name of the event. It was called Nerd Stock of all things. And that's when we actually first met, and we've been talking ever since, often on a weekly basis.
yep,
Because, for anybody listening, Steve has really become not just somebody I know, but a true friend and business partner. We have done work together. I refer business to him, he refers business to me. And most of all, we just get together and we mastermind a lot about what we're doing, show each other things that we're doing. And this community, on Mondays, I have a community called Joyminder Leaders League. And that community is for entrepreneurs to come in and to share and to be part of each other's lives and businesses without, it's just it's kind of how would you describe it, Steve? Because it's evolved and it's evolving.
I would say it's like a safe area where you can say, I have these issues.
Hmm.
I mean, I have a group of people here who have a vast amount of experience, that
Yeah.
we all respect each other, and you feel safe enough to share your trials and tribulations
Mm,
of what you're doing in business, and you're seeking help. And so what we try to do is eliminate those scraped knees and bruised elbows for people along the way, and help them, give them direction on what they need to do, whether it's from a marketing standpoint, a business operations standpoint, a developmental standpoint, markets of opportunity, all the things that you need to be looking at when you grow business.
right.
I mean, it doesn't make sense starting a bit. You may think a business is wonderful. You may have a great business plan, but if that market is not open to buy what you have or sustainable, you're headed for a dead end.
I was just this morning, I had to re-watch Simon Sinek's TED Talk on Start With Why. And I didn't
Yeah.
have to. Nobody was holding, forcing
Oh,
me.
it's still the number one TED Talk.
Yeah, 12 million views.
Yeah.
And the reason I watched it is that I've applied to become a chair of a national group. And they asked me, what's your why? But they didn't want me to have a tagline. They wanted me to use one, two, or three words. That's it to explain my why. So I reviewed, I thought I remembered what, I even have his book behind me, I'm sure of it.
Yeah.
But I thought I remembered what the whole thing was about, but you forget things over time. And he really got back to something I believe anyway. You're going to work with the people that resonate with you. But the way they know they resonate with you is that you start with your why. You don't start with your what or your how. You start that they know your why. And so it gave me a moment to think back, what is my why? And my core is that I believe people are called into being entrepreneurs. I believe we know we have a purpose. Now, if you believe that, then let's talk about that purpose, let's talk about that drive to become an entrepreneur, because that's exactly who I want to serve. Steve, what do you have any comments on that?
No,
Any?
I agree. I mean, I've always felt like, I always wanted, I'm always curious. I'm like, it's referring to, Simon Sinek's why. One thing he talks about is the curve, like the bell curves,
Yeah.
on
Oh, yeah.
LinkedIn. I've always been an early adapter.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, I've always had to have the first Palm Pilot, the first iPhone, the first, I mean, I've been, I'm self-taught on computers. I've never had a lesson. I've never taken a course. I taught myself the first spreadsheet program before Excel, which was called Quattro Pro,
Okay.
and I taught myself how to use that and set up formulas and do all that. I did one of that's another thing I did was the newspaper companies, believe it or not, this is still hard to believe. Up to the 1990, early 90s, we're still doing newspaper budgets on spreadsheets. I mean, on ledgers.
Yeah.
Pencil, pen, nine key. I mean, and when I set up my first budget template in Quattro Pro, and I could change a number, and everything would just flow and change. I mean, hours and hours and hours of work because then you could start saying, what if I hit this number? I didn't have to go through and do 150 calculations. I put one number in and it would tell me the story.
Boom.
Computer for you.
Beautiful.
And I mean, so I've always been curious about what's doing things, but I'm always like, because I became a kind of a fixing guy in the newspaper business,
Hmm.
I always looked at markets with an eye saying, okay, who's my competitor? What market share do they have? What markets do they serve? But more importantly, in really doing my homework to find out what markets are underserved.
Right.
Because if you can design a product or service for an underserved market, you're going to hit a home run every time.
Right. Yep.
And so I mean that's really what my company does is we look at clients from a small business client, and what we do is we help them by constructing business plans if they don't have one. We
Hmm.
help them more importantly with their financial performance, or especially if they want to get an SBA loan or a bank loan, they need to have. So we do all the projections, 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year, whatever we need to do. And then we look at what's usual and customary and reasonable within that space by looking at that product or service, what the expectations are. But for that product and service, there's a lot of businesses that can actually look at and see what isn't being served.
Right. 100% right there. Well, I have one more big question for you because our time has flown by. And if people want to reach out to you, want more information about you, about your business, whatever it is, what's the best way for them to find you? Of course, we're going to put it below here
Yeah.
as well. But is it LinkedIn? Is it your own personal website? Where do people?
Probably my own personal website, which is www.pcp-digital.com. You can go there and you can actually access my Calendly account from there. And if you want to go ahead and set a time period, actually with this podcast right here, if you're here and you like that and you'd like to talk to me a little bit, you can have 15 minutes of my time for absolutely nothing.
There you go. And just to be clear, because sometimes letters sound like other letters, P is in Paul, C is in
Charlie,
corn. I don't know. And then P
he
is
is
in
in Peter.
Paul again.
Yeah.
There we go. So those are the letters that he's saying there. Also, he is a podcaster. He does have a podcast. It is in Houston or
Houston,
Galveston?
it's actually the Galveston Bay area. So
Galveston Bay area of
that makes up a
Texas.
couple of counties. Yeah, Brazoria
Yeah.
County, Galveston County, Southern Harris County,
So you can
and
actually check that
Paterson.
out as well, and we'll put the link below too.
And you,
So if
you
you
might
want.
find that interesting because what the podcast is about is economic development and how small businesses grow.
Yep. And again, that can be a little specialized to your area, but usually we can get nuggets from anything. So yes, definitely check out Steve's podcast. So here's my summary and final question. So you've talked today about the importance of mentorship. You've said that a lot of the people you've worked with have mentored you along the way. You've also talked about being entrepreneurial even while you were a W-2 employee and looking for those ways and thinking like a business owner, even before you became a business owner. So, my final question really is you've actually given some really great advice for people saying, hey, if you want to start a business and you want to start a profitable business, make sure there is a niche that needs you. For instance, in starting Joyminder, we said, look, we want to help burned out professionals specifically, but niche it down. My background was as a teacher. There are millions of burned out teachers right now that we can be reaching, and that is a fairly tight niche. As even with millions, there is a service out there. And by the way, they're not bootstrapping. Teachers are employed, they have some income, and if they really truly want to move, they have the potential to do so. So that was kind of our strategy here. But for those aspiring entrepreneurs, what piece of advice do you have to them? If they're on the fence, they're not sure, should they do it? Should they not do it? Go, Steve. What do you have to tell them?
I would say invest in yourself.
Yeah.
Continuing lifelong education. If you're curious about something, read about it. Books online, YouTube, search it out. Use ChatGPT
Yeah.
to flesh out ideas. It's a great tool. It's getting better every day. I mean, really, it's like really do your research, and do that. Always understand that there's risk, you know. Make sure you have the financial backing, either personally or available, to roll it out without injuring your own personal finances.
Mm, beautiful.
Yep.
And I use Perplexity, just saying.
I mean,
So I have
whatever.
access to ChatGPT, but others too.
There's
I
all
love
kinds. I mean, there's
so many out
um,
there.
Gemini and so many others. I mean,
Yeah.
but it's Copilot. I mean, there's all use it. It's a
Yeah,
great
just
tool.
figure
Learn
it
it.
out. Figure out the tool you want to use. Will, but yes, absolutely. Use what's available and don't, like Steve has demonstrated in what he shared today, don't get stuck just because the technology or the tool in front of you is the one that's always been used. Look for the new opportunities, look for the new avenues, teach yourself. Like you said, nobody taught him computers or Excel spreadsheets. He just saw the need and went out and did it. So those are the lessons for
One last comment.
entrepreneurs.
I'll tell you what else that led to, because I was
Yeah.
investing in myself and taking, a role and not waiting for people to supply stuff to me. If you're in a W-2 situation, your bosses are going to notice that.
Yeah.
And because you are and you're investing, they will be more likely to invest in you as well.
Yeah. And to that point, when you no longer have a boss, you have to be always on the lookout for what's working, what's not working, where you can go. You are the leader, unless you're going to hire somebody else to be the visionary for your business, which is a bit challenging. Better to hire a manager, not a visionary. This is the job of the entrepreneur is to stay on top of things and keep your eyes open. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Steve. So appreciate you.
Well, Leanne, thank you very much. As always, it's a pleasure. And, I've even learned a couple things today, so I hope somebody else did too.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you to our audience for joining us on the Beyond the Business Plan to unleash your joyful business potential. Remember, entrepreneurship is a voyage you can take with other people like us. So find your tribe for the journey and give us a like or subscribe or whatever you do on your favorite podcast or video platform and keep shining and aligning with your purpose and Joyminder Solutions. And then come on back every week for our new inspiring episodes. And until that time, I'm LeAnnLyon.com, your Chief Joy Officer, signing off. Keep spreading the joy, keep leading with heart, and I will catch you on the next wave of success. Hey, sales setters, do you need energy without the crash? Check out the lifestyle section in our resources on joyminder.com/resources for delicious, healthier coffee alternatives to boost your focus and fuel your hustle. Skip the jitters, love your brew. You can also go directly to whyilovemycoffee.com, and I'll see you there. Thank you for sailing with us, sales setters. Remember, your journey goes beyond the business plan. So keep charting your own course, leading with heart, and tuning in for more joy and inspiration. Find all the resources and connections in the show notes below, and your support means the world to us. So join our conversation at #JoyMinder or simply share your favorite takeaways in the comments section below. Until next time, set your sails for success.